We've recently seen 10,000 workers lose their jobs due to a reduction in force because of a RIF, but it was done with bad data. The data was bad, but the jobs are still gone. Then we have an agency cutting its workforce in half, leaving critical programs in chaos. Why is this happening? Let's get into it. A lawsuit filed in DC claims HHS knowingly used inaccurate personnel records to decide who got the boot. We're talking about records pulled from 30 different systems. And these errors, they're errors like the wrong performance ratings, incorrect office locations, and even misidentified job roles. I don't even know how something like this could happen. Who's maintaining those databases? Who's responsible for the oversight? An attorney who's representing the plaintiff said it's like taking a hatchet to the agency with a blindfold on. One employee over there, HHS, Seattle, Washington, named Catherine Jackson, 68 years old, has been serving families for years. She gets her RIF notice, and it says her performance rating, her last one, was a 3 out of 5. But the problem is, she actually had a 4 out of 5. Now, there's nothing wrong with a 3 out of 5. A 3 out of 5 is fully successful. A 4 typically means exceeding expectations. That's not just a clerical error, that's a career-destroying mistake. Now, some agencies, they prioritize the performance ratings above anything else. If you look at the Department of Defense, that's exactly what they do over there. Now, in HHS, they don't do that, but it's a component when you're determining who gets the RIF notice. And no matter how you look at it, it's inaccurate and it's wrong. So now she's struggling to find a new job to carry her to retirement because HHS is not reinstating her. Now, we both know that she meets the full age for Social Security. So she could decide to collect Social Security, maybe get a part-time job and just ride it out. Especially if she has a balance within her TSP. With a TSP and a Social Security, some people are able to make it work, but not everybody plans for retirement the same way. And that's a big reason that we see people into their 70s that are still working. Part of it is they want to stay active, and good for them, because you need to keep the mind active. But another part is they're not ready to retire. Their TSP or 401k balance is not where it needs to be, and they need to continue to work in order to meet a certain threshold so that they can retire in dignity. Then there's Melissa. Her RIF notice said she worked in a Boston office that was completely dismantled. But she didn't. She lived in Massachusetts, but nowhere near Boston. That's where the office was, but she was a remote worker. Now, the interesting thing about this situation is her supervisor, her co-workers that actually physically worked in Boston at that government building, they kept their jobs. But for her, she didn't. The lawsuit says that these kinds of errors weren't isolated. They were systemic. Entire offices were targeted for cuts using this data, using inaccurate data. This is a potential violation of the Privacy Act, which protects federal employees from adverse actions based on inaccurate data. Now, they have it in their records. So if anyone brings it up in an interview, if anyone wants to dig and find out what was your performance like in your last job, they could potentially see something like this. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, I would never show it to them, right? And many private companies, if you're transitioning to the private sector, they're not going to ask for it. But if it's a government job, if they come back into the government and they want to see your last performance review or appraisal, they're going to look at it. And it's not just unfair, it's unlawful. According to the lawsuit, HHS was driven by a political agenda to move fast and to break things. This is the mentality of the private sector, of a small startup that's trying to innovate, that's trying to be agile and pivot. But the thing about the federal government, the public sector, specifically the government, it takes multiple months, if not over a year, to thoughtfully plan a reduction in force, to have a comprehensive plan to execute. This isn't done from one week to the next. This isn't done without doing a thorough review and analysis of that organization. You would have to analyze budgets, assess program needs, triple check employee data, union notifications, and an OPM review. But HHS tried to pull this off in a matter of weeks, sometimes days. And the result was a data disaster. It was DOJ on the front line, encouraging them to use these 30 systems that were stitched together like some sort of Frankenstein monster of personal data. And here's the crazy part. HHS knew the data was bad. An HHS spokesperson admitted that they delayed the initial RIF notifications so they could triple check the data, but it still was not enough. And then you have the secretary, the leader of HHS, RFK Jr., he said they expected to make mistakes. He said, we're going to do 80% cuts, but 20% of those are going to have to be reinstated. So they plan to fire thousands of people, fully knowing that 1 out of every 5 would have to be reinstated. Okay, let's shift to the education department where things are just as messy. They cut half of their entire workforce and they're priming the agency for elimination. But they can't do that without Congress. They understand that. Everyone on the table, we understand they cannot completely remove an agency without congressional support. It has to go through Congress. Now, in this type of situation, you have the IG, the Inspector General of Education. They're doing a review. The IG, she just wants to see how things are going. She wants to provide a little oversight, make sure that there's no laws or regulations being broken here. But she hit a brick wall. According to a notification to Congress, the Education Department is stonewalling her investigation. Education is refusing to hand over documents. They're requesting for a lawyer to be in the room. This is not how agencies interact with their IG. That just doesn't happen. Senior Democrats wrote a letter to the Education Secretary saying, the laws that establish inspectors general do not permit departments to stonewall their inspectors general, which is correct. There are over 70 IG offices. All the large federal agencies, they have an IG office. And there's a reason they're completely independent of the agency's leadership. What IG does as a mission, what do they typically do? They conduct audits, investigations, policy controls, whistleblower protections, and reporting to Congress. IG has a role. When you're downsizing an agency, there's a role for IG to play. There's an oversight role for them to play. What they do is they conduct the investigation, they conduct interviews, and then they create a report, a public-facing report that any member of the public can download from the website, and they can read exactly what's happening. That's called transparency. But the department's claiming the documents are deliberative and tied to ongoing litigation. The IG is saying that this excuse is not legally valid. They wanted to have a report this summer. That's not going to be able to happen. They're going to have to push that out. Congressional Democrats point out that programs and services are already slowing down because of the staffing cuts. A district court even issued a preliminary order saying that these rifts that are happening at the education department make it impossible for the agency to accomplish its mission. And who is impacted the most? It's students and the family of those students. So the public wants answers. So this is you're going to see an impact when it comes to certain services, when it comes to delays in financial aid processing, backlogs in student loan servicing, and unanswered questions from overwhelmed help desk, among others. Now let's turn our head over to HHS and look over there because we have an interesting twist taking place right now. You had 150 human resource specialists that were rehired in the NIH because they fired so many people. There's all this paperwork. They don't have enough human resource people to do the paperwork. So you had to rehire over 100 people to process the paperwork. That is called a self-inflicted wound, and it never had to happen. The HHS lawsuit is demanding reinstatement, back pay, and damages under the Privacy Act. Meanwhile, Congress is giving the Education Department a little bit more time so they can actually respond to their IG's request for more documentation. Now, in the midst of all this, you probably already tracking this, but Elon Musk and Donald Trump, as you know, they had like a bromance going on. They were very close, and there was a huge falling out. I would say they're not really friends anymore by a lot of people's estimation. It all spilled out over Twitter, x.com. Same thing with Truth Social. A lot of hurtful words were said. And this could have implications on how we look at Doge. Perhaps how aggressive will we continue to be with the federal workforce cuts for the rest of this year going into next year. If you want to know, if you're not caught up on that situation, you want to know a little bit more about it, check this video out next. Stay updated by signing up to the free newsletter down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.